this right. The Lord Lieutenant for Greater London and the High Bailiff and Searcher of the Sanctuary of Westminster Abbey. No, I will explain what all that means, but a very warm welcome to the clinicians here tonight that we're going to hear from a little bit, so you can see where some of the money that we've raised this year is actually producing real results. So that would be lovely to hear. So I'm going to encourage Julia to come up and introduce that in a little bit. Our core values are all about raising awareness of this disease. I was on the phone only yesterday morning to one of the top surgeons in the Royal Mars, and he was telling me that still everybody is being serviced far too late for the diagnosis. So there's a lot of need to keep the awareness going as much as the fundraising to support the desperately needed research as well. So, but the core values of the charity have been raise awareness, raise money to support the research, and have some fun in the process. For those, many of us have been through it a little bit. Actually, when you're in the system per se, some of us are still in it. It's actually quite rewarding to have something to do outside of the system. But the carbon tax comrades in arms and all that great stuff. So this year marks the end of our 6th year as a charity, so I'm quite proud of that. 7th year as a campaign. It started in 2014, I think it should, or 15, 16 as an idea, and morphed into, I think, a pretty successful charity. But before we go too much further afield, let's just take a look at some of our events this year. That was a Zumba pool party in the Midlands somewhere. It was our annual curry night. Very wet deal ramble. Just a little smattering, and of course there's been plenty of other donations and things since then as well. So just, tonight is all about acknowledging, rewarding and saying thank you to our supporters for helping us achieve some of the tremendous goals that we do achieve. So, the result this year, we're just a few £100 short of £32,000 net income this year. If we strip out the event costs, that's a gross margin of just over 27,000. And our charity, so event costs are things like the cost of actually running a golf day and things like that. So our gross margin is quite a substantial number. Out of that gross margin of 27, only £1,000 has gone to the cost of running a charity. So we set an objective 6 years ago that we wanted 80% of the funds raised to get to causes. Actually, we're hitting 95 and over 95 quite regularly now. So I think that's quite enough. So, but thank you to all the volunteers that enable that to happen, because that doesn't come free of time, and there's many people that do. So I think for me, it was always about, I wanted to be able to justify to people when I look them in the eye and ask them to put their hands in the pockets that it was for a worthwhile cause, and it was very meaningful. So on top of the money raised, we're very strong on the governance side as well. The money doesn't get handed out willingly, we're in control of where it goes. And I think that's a vital part of it, really. So we're going to hear from a couple of people in a minute a bit more about that. What I thought I'd do, Mark Ellis has run a tremendous event for the last 5 or 6 years in OpenText. OpenText is one of our founding corporate partners, and consistently raised 2 or 3K every year. Thank you, Mark, to you and your team. But Mark caught me aside. I think the email probably caught him a little bit as well. So if it's all right, I'd like to read. So I haven't named the individual, but I just wanted to share this with you, because it's not just about raising the money, really. So I'm just going to read it word verbatim, if you'll forgive me. So this is one of the members of OpenText who took the time to write this, and it's about that long, so it's only a couple of minutes. So a few weeks ago, a very close family member was suspected of having bowel cancer, and last week we got the phone call to say it was confirmed. Fortunately, the situation is relatively good, with doctors organising surgery in 2 weeks' time, and they believe a full recovery is very likely. I'd like to say the Red Trouser Day was instrumental in that quick diagnosis, but in this case, that's not strictly true, because they had not shared their symptoms with me, so I did not know they needed to act sooner. Where it has been incredibly useful is in the information the Red Trouser Day provides, which has helped us understand the situation better and has also been a source of comfort that Paul's story has been a happy one. Knowing there are people out there doing good work to support those affected and to push forward the research has been a great help. Even though we haven't engaged any of the Red Trouser Day services directly, the closeness of OpenText to this work has given us some sense of community, and just knowing that the company I've worked for over 20 years cares enough about this and led to the strange sense that my extended OpenText family is doing something about it. So I think some powerful messages for it we can take forward to other corporates out there. Last week, another family member was checked for similar symptoms. Thankfully, we had the all clear today. And I've been explaining the work Paul and OpenText have been doing and suggested there was things they could do to find out more information if they needed it. Given there is a good plan in place, the support they've been getting from the NHS has been excellent, and the speed at which the surgery has been arranged, I felt no need to do anything additional at the moment. I'm telling you this as I wanted Paul to know, and his team, that the work he is doing has so many hidden levels of positivity that he is unlikely to be completely aware. Sorry, he's likely to be completely unaware. My family has been through a dark few weeks, but the mood right now is one of resolve and positivity due to the amazing work of the NHS, the knowledge we've gained through the Red Trouser Day website, and to the feeling that the Red Trouser Day warriors are out there battling this awful situation. This is far from over for us right now, but listening to Paul yesterday was very inspiring. I spoke to my family member this morning and they agreed that I can pass this message on with thanks. They wanted to know how they can donate, and of course I passed on to our details. So I just thought I'd share that. It caught me actually, because you know, the message is getting out there. It's more than just about the money, it's the support and the care, and actually giving positivity that when you get hit with this stuff, you know, it's having that hope that can make the big difference. So I just thought, forgive me for taking a couple of minutes out, but I wanted to share that really. So our total run rate is something like £235,000 now. The numbers are a little bit out of date because I was told this morning we've just been given another £2,000 by the Lehman Brothers Trust Foundation. So that was quite nice. One of our ambassadors, Robert Chapman, who can't be with us this evening, he's raised a phenomenal amount of money for us actually, but he's also a trustee of the Lehman Brothers Foundation, manages to swing a little bit of cash out from time to time. So it's jolly good. So enough from me. What I'd like to do is invite Julia up to let us hear directly from some clinicians, research fellows, who are actually making good use of the cash we raised. And, over to you, Julia. Why not talking?
It's my real pleasure to invite two brilliant young women to come and talk to you about their work. But right, the first young woman I'm going to invite up is Micol. And I want to read you something from her application to us, because at the Royal Marsden, Imperial College, all of that area. Right, women are the population most affected by anal cancer, but also the population most neglected with respect to anal cancer prevention strategies. That caught me, because when I read that, I thought, my goodness, really? In today's world? But here we are. And Red Trouser Day is all about early detection and treatment. Now, we all talk about precancerous stages of cancer, and I know Micol's going to tell you all about that. There's a precancerous stage which can be treated with minimally invasively, and you can prevent this stuff through surveillance. But as always, we need the body of evidence on which to base these services of surveillance and so on. And that's what we're funding Micol to do. So she's developing this body of evidence on which new services will be based to hopefully save quite a lot of women. So Micol, please come up.
Thank you so much for the amazing introduction, and thank you so much for inviting me to talk about research. It's a real pleasure, honestly. So, as a team, we're all very passionate about this topic, so I hope that you guys are interested too. So yeah, my research is in cancer in high-risk women. I'm currently carrying out with Professor Tekis, Christos Kontagnosius, Ms. Sarah Mills, and Irene Chong as well. Both of them we work together. I'm Imperial College, so are they, but Irene Chong's in the Institute of Cancer Research, so we're all together doing this. So a little bit of background.
Well, I'm really proud to introduce our next wonderful researcher. And she's the winner of our first bursary. The supervisor is here with her. Maricos Kiriago, she's Raghda, sitting there about to come up. Now, you know, and you've heard about early detection, about minimal treatment, and you know that Red Trouser Day is trying very, very hard to eliminate this terrible disease. And earlier we find out, the better. And many of you here know that even though you go through colonoscopies, this, that, and the other, you don't really get a diagnosis until you've had the biopsy taken. And the histopathology there can detect microscopic changes, but it's pretty invasive. And would you believe it? Something I didn't know until I read Raghda's application is that there are even earlier molecular changes that doesn't detect. And there is also the other side of it, which is some of you have had surgery. When it comes to surgery, knowing, trying to limit the surgery, the balance between getting rid of the tumor and actually leaving healthy tissue is a key thing. So what if we had a way of really looking at that? Well, enter an optical sensor, but it's an optical sensor that detects really, really early colorectal cancer. I understand from Raghda's application, protective colon tissue impacts optical signals. She's going to describe that much better than I ever can. But we do need to understand how to use those optical signals to distinguish between healthy and diseased tissues. And there's a lot of variety of disease and healthy tissues. But we need an analysis method to underpin that understanding. And hopefully, once we again get the body of evidence through this method, which involves the in silico investigation with a realistic Montecarlo model of colon light interactions, I'll stop using words. Then hopefully it will lead to the development of an optical sensor that will be minimally invasive, that will really detect cancer very, very early. Raghda, the floor is yours.
Hello everyone, thank you Julia for that lovely introduction. My name is Raghda Al-Halawani. I am a PhD student in the Research Centre for Biomedical Engineering at City University of London. I am proudly supervised by my professor, Professor Kenneth, who is also the director of the Research Centre. So before I begin, I'd like to thank the trustees and the Red Trouser family. You've given me the opportunity to devote research to one of my personal passions, which is cancer. So thank you once again, it's a great honor. Okay, so without further ado, I would like to present my work so far in the Montecarlo characterization of colon tissue, working towards an early detection of colorectal cancer.
But I think hopefully you've enjoyed two incredible presentations. That's given you comfort that the money's going into really worthwhile programs of activity by very competent people. So I think we should just show our appreciation too. So Kenneth, would you like to come up here and help me distribute some acknowledgements and awards?
Yes.
I'd like to start actually by giving now to I'll do it. There you go. We've got our act together. We rehearse this every time. Okay. I think the first one goes to Micol for a wonderful presentation on. Thank you. And likewise for Raghda. what I'd like to do, start off by doing is acknowledging. We have started, yes, I know. That's very true. I've got a slightly different format for some of the awards tonight, Ken, but I've written some thank you letters to our trustees who put in a hell of a lot of time and effort. So the first one up is Rohan. Rohan, would you like to come up? Now, Rohan actually set a new vision for the charity earlier this year, and he carries the tag of head of content. This is for you as well, Rohan.
Finish your point,
we're building Rohan's ambition is to build a reliable source of information for people who are going through bowel cancer or who might be worried about bowel cancer as part of the tools on our website. Rohan's done a lot of work in creating a YouTube channel for us and trying to put formidable content out there. I hope you ladies don't mind, but we have been recording tonight, and we'll edit it and you'll get to see it, but in due course it's the sort of content we want to be able to put on the website. So thank you, Rohan. A lot of work's been going in. Tim is a dear friend of mine and has been a supporter of the charity. He's effectively driving our sort of CHOPS team now, which is the governance of the charitable side of our award funding, the funding that we make. So Tim, thank you, Tim. I did point this out. These guys are trustees as well. So
You did say that.
I did say that. Thank you.
Good job, we're listening.
Julia, who's with me all the way from not only was she with me in the hospitals, but Mrs. Finch now. Thank you, Ken. Ken was pressurising me for many years, I have to say. And another little, Ken did call me one afternoon, and when he proudly announced his appointment to the Westminster Abbey. What's it again? Searcher thing, whatever it is. Yeah. And I said, how on earth do you get into the position of being elevated and invited to such things? He said, do you want to know the secret, Paul? I was, go on then. Very much he's been pressurising me to get married for years. He said, I've been married for 44 years.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
With a charity, we need to be kept legal. Stefan helped not only set up the charity as a charity in the very first place, but he did duck out for a little while when he had another high-profile job to go and do for a bit. But Stefan, thank you so much for keeping us legal. So come on, and our most recent addition to the Board of Trustees is Kevin. Kevin's has actually been helping raise money for the charity for many, many years, and is also a long-standing friend of mine. So I do manage to rope in quite a lot of people I know. So thank you, Kevin. Thank you very much. Okay, and next on the list is Mari Louise from the Royal Marsden, who, there she is. Mari's been our coordinator with the Royal Marsden Cancer Charity for quite some time now, supports our golf day on a regular basis, and kindly brings up the wine. We had a bit of a chat. You forgot to bring the. Well, I didn't actually. It's probably my fault for not reminding you. But we've made a board decision tonight. We're going to make an award this year again that's to the tune of 18,000 right now. There's more funds. We already got a bit of money in the bank as well, but you'll get the funds in the next. So that's. I think that takes us up to like £140,000 donated to the Royal Marsden over the last 6 years.
Right, from what, yeah.
So
thank you very much. That's, yeah.
but unfortunately, we'll
Yeah,
have to.
we'll do another
We'll
drive
do a check signing.
I want wine
We'll
though,
come back.
that's what I want.
Right. There's some major. There's a few people who aren't here tonight. I'd just like to announce that Tony Smither, who lost his wife to bowel cancer, he's one of my friends down in Deal. He ran a Deal round. It was incredibly wet this year. It did raise £2,500, but Tony's probably raised nearer £10,000 for the memory of his wife over the last few years. So, but it's a long journey for him to come up. But I will be giving him one of these awards in due course. Robert Chapman, who also can't be with us tonight, I think he must be heading upwards towards 100k himself, actually. So incredible amount of and energy, and he still keeps doing it in many forms. And the poor chap did lose his brother to leukemia and some other conditions earlier this year, so he's had a tough time. And Rosie is usually a tremendous supporter of ours, is there all the time and helping. So, but I'm going to say thank you to these guys privately in the background because they couldn't be with us today. Where am I going next? So, right, Les Green. Les is chairman of the East Surrey Business Club, who kindly called me in October last year and said, would I like to attend a Christmas luncheon? He said, I'm chairman of this business club. I haven't personally heard of it before, but I was very delighted to go along. And it was I was expecting to have a sort of an afternoon with a raffle and maybe we'll take a check for 500 quid. What actually happened was something completely different, and we took home £5,000 pretty much. So Les, please come up and oh, sorry, Caroline. Caroline continues to support the brand, and just a token of our thanks to her. It's, for those of you that don't know or aren't aware, it's Caroline's design that's on everything we do. And there's one gentleman who I was introduced to in the very beginning. Mark, you've been a supporter from before it was even before it was anything actually, and introduced Caroline into the beginning. Mark, as I said earlier, has run a number of open text corporate events and so on, and such an enthusiastic supporter. I thought it was only fair that you, because I noticed on the recent Zoom call that you were lacking one of these. So.
That's true. It's true.
And that just leaves you one last person. Kenneth, you've been a supporter for quite a number of years from the beginning when it was early doors as a charity, so thank you, sir. Here's something to put on your book. I always think, a number of you have heard Ken before, but
I'll say something different.
but I'd just like to hand the reins over to Ken to say a few words. Thank you. Sure.
Thank you. Well done. Well done. It's, so I think we should give him a particular round of applause. Not just for getting married. So I thought I'd say a few words about the context of what we're doing this evening, what this is all about. And I'm going to do not the medical context, or the scientific context. We had, I think, two brilliant, actually 2.5 brilliant, I should say, presentations on that. I said to both ladies when you came up, but I think what's most exciting about what you're doing is the enthusiasm with which you're doing it. And I want to use that enthusiasm as the bridge into the context that I want to talk about. So I want to talk a few minutes about the human condition rather than the medical scientific condition. So the yang and the yin and the yang, it's the other side of something which is hugely important. And the lens I want to use to think about the human condition are the events of the last few years in our country. And depressingly, I want to start with Brexit. But if I want you to remember back, it's quite hard to do this because it was the other side of COVID. But I want you to remember back to the Brexit campaign and then the votes and then the result. But the period of time in our country, we were massively divided. And I don't care which side of the debate you're on or whether you're just bored by the whole thing. It was a hugely divisive period of time in our country, deeply unconstructive, deeply unpleasant. But it divided, obviously, political parties, but it divided families, it divided relationships. And if you can remember, as I say, it's hard because it's so the other side of COVID, but it was a really difficult time for, I think, everybody in the country. And then we had the pandemic. And again, if you cast your mind back to the beginning, the early days of the pandemic, it was irrelevant. Something happening in China, well, these things happen all the time. They had avian flu, didn't they, and something else. And then it started to appear here, and all those worry warts you've been talking about what would go wrong if we had a pandemic, suddenly started to pay attention to them, and then we had a pandemic. and we had lockdowns, and we had all those things that happened. And what happened in the country was we forgot Brexit, we forgot division, and we came rushing back together again. And I have to tell you a story about a lady I met in a food bank in my capacity as Lord Lieutenant. I was out to visit a food bank and a women's support group. It was last year. It was out in the East End. This is a women's support group. I don't know what all the issues were that the women had, but there was certainly a recently widowed lady there, etc. And these ladies looked after each other, helped each other out. And I said, and it was a very warm session because they were pleased that I'd gone to the trouble of going to visit them. But they wanted to tell me things. And one woman, I will never forget this woman. She was a young mother, and she told the following story about what life had been like in the East End of London, let's say in Newham, in the East End of London, actually during the lockdown period. So I'm sitting listening, and I know that all these ladies have got problems, so I'm assuming the whole story she's going to won't be positive. So I'm being charming and oleaginous and all those sorts of things, and waiting to try and find something optimistic to say. She told the following story. She said every day before lockdown, she would take her little boy down a very long road in Newham to a bus stop and wait for a bus to come. And when the bus came, she'd get on the bus with the boy, take him to school, and then she'd come back again. And she was a Muslim lady who had a hijab, and she said every day I'd stand there at the bus stop, and a white English woman living in a house opposite the bus stop would look at me. She said, she'd look at me behind the curtains. That we had no contact, no relationship at all, but every day I was there, this woman would watch me inside on the bus. So I've heard so many stories over the years of discrimination and unpleasantness and so on in the country. And remember, this was before lockdown, so post-Brexit. Anyway, she said, then lockdown happened, and so I didn't take my little boy to school. And so one day, I opened my front door, and on the doorstep, so my heart stopped. Well, I can imagine what's going to be on the doorstep. She said, there was a card and a bunch of flowers. And I opened the card, she said, and in it, it said the following. We haven't seen you for some time, and we're worried that you're okay. The lady behind the curtain. So the shift from the battles of Brexit to the coming together as a nation, and there are many other stories, but that one is just such a, I think, such a powerful one. So we've got the pandemic, and we're all worrying about it, and it's horrible. And some other amazing things happened, some big scale things. The Queen, bless her, in her last days or the last weeks, did an e-visit to the Royal London Hospital in Whitechapel Road. And she turned up on a huge TV screen. It wasn't Zoom, it was something much more technical, but it was on some huge screen. And we're up at the top floor of the hospital. Somebody will know it. The hospital is brand new, so it's a great, again, there was criticism of the NHS, never spent any money in infrastructure, etc. Well, there's a brand new, clean, hygienic hospital in Whitechapel. So that's clearly not entirely true. But there were 2 floors left over which were excess capacity when it was built. And they were there for, at some point, they might be needed for something, but as they could build them, and they also need the height for the helicopters around, they had these 2 floors. I think it was 4.5 weeks. 700 builders, plumbers, electricians, etc., turned those 2 floors into an ICU unit for 160 people. And the Queen turned up on this big screen to thank the builders, the managers, etc., etc. Less than 5 weeks. And the builders were saying it was quite difficult to do because there are only 2 relatively small lifts, just pretty much get a trolley in, at which you had to take all the building materials while social distancing, all 700 people. So some amazing things happened in our country post-Brexit and because of the pandemic. It brought us smashingly back together again. The Duke of Edinburgh passed, you'll remember, and that was rather sad and everything. It was a bit odd though. Nobody really knew the Duke of Edinburgh. He wasn't loved in the way the Queen was, but nevertheless, he was part of the furniture. And we had his memorial service at Westminster Abbey, where, as you pointed out, I'm High Bailiff and Searcher Sanctuary. Seems like a really good seat. It's all services from the Abbey. And it was a fantastic service. And it brought him, as it were, to the attention of everybody, and the things that he did and the things he cared about. And for example, as you know, I'm patron of this charity, but the Duke of Edinburgh was patron of what's now called London Youth, used to be the Boys and Girls Clubs of London, for 72 years. Anyway, the Duke of Edinburgh passed. We had the Queen's Green Canopy, which was a slightly ramshackle, very Britishy sort of thing, where people got together and planted trees. Actually, by the time Queen's Green Canopy came to the end and we had the pageant, over 1 million trees have been planted in the country by people just saying, you know what, we should do something to recognise the fact that she's been there for 70 years. Let's plant a tree. 1 million trees. So Brexit, and then we're planting 1 million trees. It's not compatible. Something, a blip happened in our lives. Much better story. So anyway, the Queen's Green Canopy, and then of course was that amazing weekend when we had the, it was a whole week, but we had the amazing weekend with the concert and the pageant. Some of you may have seen on television. That was a great moment in my life where Julia, my wife, and I had 10 official engagements over 4 days. I had never been as tired as I was in those 4 days. And coming towards the end of it, we were going to the concert, which is the day before the pageant. And all I could focus on, because training around with one's wife, getting the right place at the right time, doing the right kinds of things, I find it hard enough on my own. When there are two of us, it's really difficult. So the whole thing I came on was just conforming to this grid that she and I, for the first time in our lives, even when our daughters got married, we didn't do this much planning. We did a lot of planning. Anyway, the most important thing to me was not to be in any of the stands around the concert, which weren't covered, because it was, if you remember, it was quite rainy weather. And to my joy, I discovered I was in the one with the roof. So Jill and I climb up to the top of the stairs, and I'm relaxed because we're going to be undercover, but still stressed because we haven't finished. We've got another day to go out there. And I show my QR code to some lady, and she said, oh, you're in seats A4 and 5, or 5 and 6 or something. So that's obviously at the back, fantastic, because at the back, it's completely covered all the way over, whereas the front isn't covered. So I think, oh, like, relief. You're not allowed to bring umbrellas and stuff like that. So I set up the steps to go to the back, and she's no, sir, you're on the front. All I think is bugger. If it rains, we're going to get wet. And she said, you're A4 and 5, the seats have all got your names on them, though. So I looked at the first seat, Duke of Gloucester. I looked at the second seat, Duchess of Gloucester. I looked at the third seat, Lady Olisa. I looked at the fourth seat, Sir Kenneth Olisa. Bugger. We're not, it's barely over top of our heads. Fifth seat, Duchess of Cambridge. And suddenly my life changed. I realised there were things that one should appreciate rather than complain about. Spectacular evening, but no Queen that night, remember? And then we had the pageant the next day. And there were two incredible things, and using the real meaning of the word incredible, not the one that everybody uses all the time, but I mean actually impossible to imagine. Things happened. One was, of course, the Queen turned up and saw it and actually got to see what we were all saying to her, which is very, very moving to be there. But the other one was, and it captures for me what it's like to be British, what really matters to us, the Monty Python stream that runs through us. Was, and you'll remember the pageant, because I'm sure you watched bits and pieces of it, if not all of it. I was obviously, actually by then I was sitting next to somebody less important, merely the Duke of Gloucester, the other side of it, I think, the second day. But there was a cycling piece, when Chris Hone and some other Olympic cyclists cycled down from Amblesey Arch up to the Victoria Monument and around and away, followed by about 100 cyclists of mixed, I would say, capacity. There were these 100 people cycling along, and I'm looking at it, and it's not really very interesting. 100 people cycling by, I have to say, on a scale of things to be bothered about by then, when all I could really think about was going to sleep, wasn't very interesting. So I looked down, and I saw there was one bloke on a bicycle, and it was like wasps, it was a whole cloud of them. One chap on a bicycle sitting on the handlebars, facing backwards, but pedaling in the right direction, steering his bike with his bum. And he was surrounded by men, they were all men in this thing, doing wheelies on the rear wheel of their bicycle. But they were committed wheelies. They had no front wheel. So there was 10 bicycles with no front wheel, with people who come all the way from Amblesey Arch, around it, etc., around a man who's steering like this, not really looking behind him. And I thought, actually, this is my country. What would Putin think of that? What would Biden think of that? It would mean nothing to them, but it's our country. Anyway, as I say, and then the Queen came and saw how much we care. So that, as again you will remember, was a spectacular, successful, happy, I think, really weekend. And then of course we had the funeral. And everything changed. And just a couple of stories about my experience at the funeral. When the coffin with Her Majesty came to London, it landed at Northolt Airport. I think the most moving is an understatement of what it was like, but the most powerful moment of my life, I think, certainly ranks the birth of our children. It was one of those just amazing things, was this huge plane landed at Northolt Airfield, and the receiving party was the Prime Minister, I should actually say, I'll return to this in a minute, but the then Prime Minister, the Secretary of State for Defence, the head of the RAF was there, who else? We have there, the local mayor, Lord Lieutenant, in uniform, a couple of other people, standing there waiting on the tarmac. This huge, unbelievably noisy plane comes down the land. It's a transport plane. And if you remember that night, and you probably all can remember that night, it was really miserable. It wasn't quite raining, but it was trying to rain. It was gloomy, it was dark, it was that just, I mean, it was, you know, we used to go to school in that kind of weather. Remember, it was that kind of misery thing, totally appropriate for the event. Anyway, this huge plane comes down, it taxis over to the hearse, which you will have all seen on television if you stand by the roadside, and then they cut the engines. And suddenly all we could hear were very, very distant sirens of things happening probably 5-10 miles away. So it was deathly silent. I mean, it was just, so that alone was dramatic. Princess Anne and her husband came off, they'd accompanied the coffin. They came off and joined the receiving party. The back of the plane came down, and the pallbearers that we all saw on the funeral day then came slowly down with the coffin, put it into the hearse. Then the hearse drove at probably 5 miles an hour, maybe less than that, round and then in front of us. So we're standing there. It's just one of those, it's like watching a Shakespeare play, but I'm in it. It's one of those moments of history. And as it came in front of us, everyone in uniform, including me, was saluting. And Princess Anne, and you may have seen this on television, Princess Anne curtsied to her mother and the monarch. And she didn't do a little bob, she did a all the way down back. It was just the most powerful statement about what we were doing, what we were seeing. And then you remember the hearse came into town, into London, and to Parliament, for the lying state, and the roads were lined all the way to London, and people, and as it had been in Scotland, all the way to Westminster Hall. So that moment of Princess Anne curtsy will live with me to my, hopefully a long time, but to my dying day. And then, of course, there was the day of the funeral. And in my capacity as High Bailiff and Searcher Sanctuary, I had a really good seat, and I was part of a procession inside the Abbey. And again, most amazing thing. Heads of state arriving, scuttling through to find their seats. President Biden arriving, sitting in row 14. Why is he in row 14? He's a really important person. Because rows 1 to 13 were for the Commonwealth. And he made his country made a decision in the 18th century, and you know, these decisions have to be lived with. The Vice President of China came to the funeral. It was the most amazing experience, just seeing all these people coming together. The Archbishop of Canterbury's sermon essentially said, you might all be famous now, but will you be famous after you've died? Whereas the Queen had allegedly 4 billion people around the world watching that funeral. The impact was enormous. Now, you're probably wondering, where's he going with all of this? Well, where I'm going with all this is, what runs through all of those stories? The answer, I would argue, I'm going to argue to you, are core British values. Whether it's the nutter on the bicycle, or the Queen showing up to say thank you, or the tree plants, it's all about things that we care about. And the things that we care about, the old lady behind the window, behind the curtain, things that we care about are the things that the Queen, the values that the Queen stood for. We know she stood for duty. We know she stood for service, and she served amazingly till the end. We know she stood for community, lady behind the curtain, core values. We know that she stood for looking for the good in people and not the bad. Me expecting a terrible story from the lady not behind the curtain, and actually hearing a positive story. Actually, those values are core British values. They're not universal. I don't think you could argue that set works in Russia, for example. So they're not universal. They're very, very precious. But something else then happened, which was Boris Johnson was defenestrated. Liz Truss, who'd been there at the landing of the coffin, got the job and then was defenestrated, and Rishi Sunak has taken over. So what happened? Well, the answer was the people who share those values, who stood in the rain to go and pay their last regards to the coffin in the lying in state. The people let it be known to their elected representatives that neither of those two prime ministers was acceptable. And an American said to me, well, what the hell's happening with your politicians, hey? I said, well, two things. First of all, we don't have a monopoly in our country of bad politicians. I said, but what we do rather proud ourselves on. We changed our head of state and 2 prime ministers without a shot being fired, a stone being thrown, a barricade being built, a building being torched. We did it because the values of the people rose up and said, actually, this is not acceptable. It's not a joke. It's not funny. We're not prepared to deal with this. It's not acceptable. And it happened seamlessly, peacefully, as it ought to do in a civilized country. And why am I saying that? Because that's what you're all about tonight. That's what this is all about. That's what Red Trouser is all about. Red Trouser Day, rather, is all about. It's about ordinary people just saying, you know what, there's a difference that I can make to other people, because none of you is doing it for yourself. Difference I can make to other people. And I'm down, you know what, I'm going to do that, whether it's the scientific investigation, whether it's the practical, going across the Atlantic to try to do those big experiments and show the Americans what they need to see in this area, or the rest of you raising money and so on. You're doing it for no reason other than you can and you should. And I would argue those are our core British values, and we should be so proud of them. They're very, very precious. We had that brief Brexit experience, and we all fell out, and actually we've tasted what the alternative feels like. You know what? And we've landed back squarely where we need to be on valuing the things that matter. So I thank you, as your patron, for all that you've done, and we've been thanking you explicitly through Paul gifts. But actually, there's a bigger message that I encourage you to take outside to the outside world. When you tell your friends, your associates, and your family members about what you were doing this evening and why you were doing this evening, make sure that they understand my point about value. Make sure that they understand that actually you're part of a wonderful nation that tries to get these things right. And when we don't, we do course correction as opposed to becoming stupid in something. So I think this is a brilliant, really brilliant organisation. Obviously, it's fantastic from a health perspective and a science perspective, but actually, it's a crucible of everything that matters in this country. So, as your patron, thank you. Go tell the story, and let's get some more money.
Whereas a tremendous wisdom and I hope resonate with many of you. So that's pretty much it for this evening. Just to finish off with, I would like to remind you of a couple of key dates. For those of you that are kicking around on Saturday morning with not much to do, Julia has organised for the second year running the historical art tour at Tate Britain. Last year we went around Tate Modern, guided by a wonderful art historian who actually started explaining to me why some of this modern art actually meant something. And I think I got it, although I didn't retain it all, but and we're going around. Julia's organised. Do you want to say anything about Saturday?
Yes, yes, we're meeting at Tate Britain on Saturday. We're looking for a donation of £35 per person because we're paying our art historian, but she's doing it for a minimum amount. So it is fundraising, but for me, she taught, I love art, and I thought I knew how to look at art, but no, she gave me some real insights. She doesn't bore us with facts and so on. She actually teaches you how to look at art and trust your own eyes and your own feelings when you look at it. So it's really worthwhile. It's a lovely morning, just sauntering around, chatting away, listening to somebody who is very, very interesting. You know, having a coffee and enjoying ourselves. So please come. If anybody hasn't signed up, go onto the website. And if you go onto the website and you look for donors, I think current donors or active.
Why don't we send out a note in the morning, dear?
Okay.
With a link.
But anyway, go on to that.
Kevin's going to be organising in March, come April, one of his guided city walks. Although Kevin, I think before Sir Kenneth goes, you want to grab him, so I'll let you. I might steal your thunder on that one. And then September the 14th, our flagship event is it raised £10,000 net profit this year, which is our annual golf day. It's now morphed into an annual golf and ramble day at Farley Golf Club. So we shall repeat that experience, and I'm sure there's going to be other stuff coming on, but I just want to get September the 14th in your minds. But thank you so much for coming on this evening. I hope it's lived up to expectations. I hope you got something out of how your money's being spent very wisely, and perhaps stronger insights as to what the purpose of the charity. Thank you, Sir Kenneth, for your kind words. There's some powerful messages in there as well. But I think we're here for Kevin. We've got another best part of an hour. Is that right? Before we have to depart. Yeah. So And thank you to Marie-Louise for the wine. So I doubt she wants to take it home. That's it. Thank you.